Thank you, Mr. Mohan. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Mr. Robert Hutchings. I'll be chairing the hearing today. Joining me on the board, are Ms. Carrie Linklater and Mr. Richard Whitbread. Representing the Assessment Department, City of Winnipeg, is Mr. Matthew Barakis, and our administrative personnel today is Mr. Zachary Mohan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questioning by the applicant and the panel members, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questioning by the assessor and the panel members. Again, each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Mr. Mohan, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Please. Okay, Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Barakis.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Harry Reimer.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan. Welcome to both parties. First item on the docket is item number 1, file number 24-2690, roll number 06093225700. Address is 321 Duluth Cathedral Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barakis, when you're ready, please.
All right. Thank you very much. File 24-2960, roll number 06093225700, 321 Duluth Cathedral Avenue. Assessed value by the model 2025 is $19,388,000. It's 3 buildings. Built between 1912 and 2007. So there's an effective year build of 1990 and 2007 on it. So there was an older building that was converted into the assisted living. I think it was around 2007. Actually, I got some permits at the end of my brief. And then they constructed some additions on it as well. So that's why there's such a wide range in the overall year built. 142 suites, 8 indoor, 22 outdoor parking. So, in reviewing the applicant's evidence, I'm actually going to make a recommendation on this one. So if you go to my page 3, please. So I'm going to take that 998,468 cap or net operating income rather, and then change the cap to 5.5. That modifies it to 18,154,000, and I'm doing that to account for the size of the units. The units are quite small, given that it's an assisted living. That needs to be accounted for, and I'm not accounting for it by adjusting the rent. I'm accounting for it by adjusting the cap rate. So I'll just stop there and then I can keep going.
Okay, but Mr. Baracus, can I confirm you're using the existing net operating income at 998,468, but adjusting the cap rate from 5.15 to 5.5%? Is that correct?
Yes.
And resulting in a recommendation to revise the assessment to $18,154,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll stop you right there. Mr. Reimer, any comments?
Apologies. Very much appreciate Mr. Brokus taking a look at this. We're still a wee bit apart on value, but do appreciate the recommendation. If we could proceed, and I'll present my evidence in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Baracus, please proceed through your brief.
Okay, sounds good. So by glancing ahead, unless something's changed, we actually agree on the net operating income. So it is predominantly a cap rate discussion, but on page 3, you can see of the 142 units, 63 of them are bachelor, 69 are 1 bedroom, 10 are 2 bedroom. And I've got the rent comps on page 4, but again, it's not really under dispute. I did a CMHC analysis as well on the units, age, area, and size. I looked at I used the 1975 on page 5. I used the age group of 75 to 89 because I didn't want to use the newest category for year built. I felt that might be a bit misleading given some of the units are from a building that's originally 1912. So I dialed that back. And it looks like when you take those 3 factors into consideration, it's about right on the market rent there. Then we got the source charts on page 7 and 8. Page 9, or so 8 and 9 is our cap rate stuff. I'm sure everyone here has seen it before, so not meant to be site specific, just some examples of 3-year stabilized sales, income and expenses that support the range of caps the model puts out. Then on page 11, you can see the buildings. So you can the buildings on the property. You can see the older building, and then you can see the newer ones. It's kind of a odd shaped 2 rectangles stuck together property. So there's old and new, and the old was refreshed. You can see in the permits at the end when. Some exterior photographs. I don't have any interior photographs of it. I mean, it is an assisted living. Probably wouldn't do too bad to take a inspection of this thing. And then the description of the operation on page 13 and 14 shows how they get housekeeping and meals, and there's a bistro, shuttle service, beauty salon. And you got the actuals here. We can't value the business component because you see the rent there. Collecting encompasses those services is quite a bit more than what we're attributing to it, but we're not assessing that because that's not real to you. And then we have the permits at the end. on page 17 and 18. They just talk about the recent work. So in 99, there's 2 new additions onto the existing covenant, consist of a 329 square foot elevator addition and a 2,400 square foot 8-car garage addition. And then 2007, this is the occupancy permit. It was for the occupancy of the completed construction of the additions that were put on the older building to accommodate the total units that we're assessing. So overall, I bumped the cap. I thought 5.15, given the size of the units, needing an adjustment. The bachelor units are quite small. They're between 200 and 300 square feet. The 1 bedrooms are in the 400 square foot range, and the 2 bedrooms are in the 700 square foot range. So I felt that a 5.15 cap, though the building is newer, that doesn't really take the size of the units into account. So my rec again, 18,154,000. That's my evidence. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Baracus. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Just a couple, Mr. Chairman, and could I request, because all of the capitalization rate is going to be under review for all of the properties. So with your permission, what I propose to do is ask the questions once and then just have them asked and answered and carry those asked and answered questions forward to the remainder of the hearings or
Okay.
the properties if we could.
Thank you.
So Mr. Brokus, first of all, thank you very much for reviewing that and for your thoughts on the capitalization rate. We're still a wee bit apart, but appreciate you taking another look at it. Could we go just briefly, please, to your page 8? And Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, I'm in complete agreement with Mr. Brokus. The NOI is not under discussion. It's just capitalization rate. So on page 8, Mr. Brokus, that's the, and again, you were forthright in your comments. That's the chart. It's not meant to be representative of necessarily any site-specific sales considerations, but rather to reinforce with the range shown there, reinforce the model derived caps. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, the department, well, I'll take a step back. We can agree that with the calculation of the capitalization rate, what goes into that derivation of that cap rate is based on a stabilized net operating income, which in turn is based upon a stabilized gross potential rent, vacancy allowance, and a stabilized expense ratio. That mathematically we could agree is the how you derive the cap rates, correct?
Yes, that was the method.
Okay. So, and with respect to the rates, though, the department has not provided you specifically or put in these materials the assumptions that were made as to the potential gross rents or the vacancy stabilization or the expense stabilization in the materials you've provided, correct?
That is correct. I've been told I'm not allowed to put them in for privacy concerns, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, I don't want to, in the absence of the information in your brief, I really can't comment on the revenues or expenses that were assumed, but certainly without that information, we could agree that on the face of the chart on page 8, it's not possible. We put it this way: we may well differ on some stabilization of PGI or expenses, resulting in different capitalization rates. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just briefly on your page 3 then. So again, what, if I understood right, what you've done is the model driven cap rate was 5.15, and you're suggesting because of the suite sizes in this particular case, perhaps some obsolescence in that respect, you've used 5.50, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the assessor?
One clarification, if I may, and I have to get there, so bear with me. I'm down into the financial statements. Bear with me while I get there. I think it may have been the roll. Okay. Yes, I'm on page 16. And I'm looking at those rents. It shows for the suite counts. And you said something, but you passed over it fairly quickly, and I missed your comment. What did you say about these rents?
Oh, okay. So this is an assisted living. So like those are the rents, but those are the rents inclusive of the services that are provided on page 14, like the non-realty aspect, the 3 meals a day, the shuttle service, the beauty salon. So like we're looking at this and the applicant is looking at this like it's if it was purchased by someone to run it as an apartment. So we're not valuing that aspect. So we're not looking at the actuals.
Yeah, you're using the 1,026 as your average rent, which is a model-driven rent, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned small suite size, and I believe I saw some sizes of 708 square feet for a 2-bedroom apartment, 400 and some square feet for a bachelor apartment. Those are pretty small, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. There.
And with that, sorry, have you been in the building?
No, I have not, and I know we've got a pending municipal board on it, and we'll definitely be doing an inspection at that time.
I haven't seen any photos.
Yeah,
But
I looked.
Sorry, if I can just finish. You mentioned or something, maybe the literature mentioned a very small kitchen. Do you have any idea what's in a kitchen in this property?
No, I mean, I was looking, the applicant, in the applicant's brief, I mean, that's where I got these suite sizes from. I know some of these assisted livings, some have full kitchens, some have smaller kitchens and kitchenettes with smaller stoves. And then some don't have like stoves at all. But I don't know, not having that information, I can't comment one way or the other. Perhaps the applicant might be able to answer that question better than me.
Yeah, we'll come back to that
Yeah.
when we're with the applicant. So you're right, he may be able to. So with that then, oh, sorry, one other question on that point. There's 3 buildings, I believe you mentioned. Are all the buildings the same regarding the size of suites, or did the newer ones have a bigger square footage with a bigger kitchen than the others?
You know what? That's a very good question. I don't know.
Okay. And do you know if there's a central kitchen that serves all of these suites, the 142 suites? I seem to remember saying something about meals included.
Yeah, on page 14, I believe so. It says they get 3 meals a day in a comfortable dining room, and then there's a country kitchen, there's a large private kitchen and dining room, so our guests can host guests for that special occasion. Like I assume that the meals are provided.
So that would
Okay.
suggest a
Yeah.
commercial
Yeah.
kitchen for 142 people. It'd be pretty onerous to prepare that on a.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
if you look at page 16, the rents they're actually getting for the suite sizes that the people are living in, you'd think that there would have to be some meals involved as well.
Yeah, you could make that assumption, given the suite sizes that we've seen. I mean, some apartments in Winnipeg are this expensive now, without meals, but I think what your point is well taken. Small suite size, very limited kitchen, central dining room. This probably is inclusive of meal plans.
That's
Okay.
it, so.
Yeah, and maybe the applicant can clarify that when we get to it. So when we look at an investor wanting to buy this property and converting it into apartments, say, not an assisted living facility, would you say that's feasible given the size of these the size of these suites without a huge investment?
I mean, like it's not ideal. Like this one is in a great area for rental, St. Boniface. There's the University of St. Boniface nearby. It could be attractive for someone to buy and then have as student housing. I know student kind of purpose-built student housing buildings like that. Big one that just went up on Hemina. They kind of have atypical type unit designs as well.
Yeah.
So I'd say yes, your point is well taken, and that's why I bumped the cap rate up to kind of try and take that into consideration.
Yeah, okay. And you also have a huge hospital just down the street too.
Yeah, like St. Boniface
That's
is
requiring places to live.
yeah, it's in a for rental. It's in one of the, in my opinion, it's in a great spot.
Okay. Do you understand the risk, the sort of the relationship between cap rate risk and interest rates?
Well, a cap rate is simply a rate that is reflected by a net operating income and a sale price. Like it doesn't have anything to do with like GIC rates or interest rates or anything. Yeah, the cost of money, of course, with interest rates affects purchasing power. But like it's not like a rate of return. I've heard that a few times here at the provision, and
I'm not going down that path. I'm thinking that there's a higher expectation in a higher interest rate environment that you would want a higher return on your investment. That seems to make sense, doesn't it? And so expect a higher cap rate. And you have to agree that at this particular point of our point of reference, there were high interest rates, sort of the highest we've had in the past number of years.
Well, I mean, historically, they're still pretty low. And if you look at the sales on page 8, these sales, you know, these are the most recent ones with 3-year stabilized arm's length, not for rental that I could find, were sold within this general time period. So, I mean, I'm at 5.5 for a 2000, whatever, 1990, 2000 year effective year built. You look at some of the year builds here, and especially 2390 McPhillips. That's the one closest in effective age. Now, I'm not saying they're the same because of the suite sizes, but look, I've put like basically like a 3/4 of a point premium on what McPhillips has.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's the best information we have. And I just can't jump to conclusions and make kind of unsupported adjustments.
None of those sales are as big as this particular one, are they?
Sorry, say it again?
None of those sales have as number of suites that this property has.
No, that's correct. But these are, I mean, these are the best ones that we have. I can't find big ones and then kind of like shoehorn them in if they don't meet like standard. So I had a 3/4 of point off 2390 McPhillips. I think based on the area, I think based on the size of the suites, I think that's pretty good. At 18 million. That's 127,845 per unit. Mm-hmm. So I feel that's a fair valuation.
Okay. My comments will carry forward to some of the other properties as well, Mr. Chair. I won't repeat this.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple. Good afternoon, Mr. Barakas. I'm just wondering, in regards that part of this building was built in 1912. Do you know square footage wise how much was the original 1912?
Let me look this up here quick. I don't have it in my brief, so I can look it up if while you're asking me other questions to move things along, and then I could hopefully have an answer for you.
Sure, that would be fine. Thank you. So in regards to your recommendation, you adjusted the asking number on your own, and that was all in regards to suite size, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. So so the model does not take that into consideration, suite size. Is that information input in order to get a cap rate?
well, that's something that would be taken into consideration on the rents, but on a property like this, like if we go up to page 4, we don't have an input for like net suite size in our net unit size rather in our system. We have gross floor area per unit, but with a building like this, it has a bunch of common area, like a commercial kitchen and beauty salon and so forth. So,
Okay, so then I'm just going to ask, is the suite mix taken into consideration at all in
Yeah.
deriving the cap rate?
the suite on the cap rate, I don't think so. I think it's age, area, and size.
Hmm. So pretty broad.
Well, I believe it's done by, but to my understanding, that's how it's calculated.
Okay. Are you aware of any subsidies associated with this property for tenants?
For tenants, no, that's not something that I would consider relevant.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Barakas, I'm not sure if you can answer. My impression is there's a mixture of independent and assisted living in this complex. Am I correct in that?
I'm not sure if there's independent and assisted living. I just know it's not like open to me or anyone. Like it's not like open to everybody. It's like a
What I'm
market.
getting at is, are some of the we'll call them suites, are they independent where they do not take advantage of the food? They don't pay for the food
I'm not sure.
with kitchens? So okay, maybe Mr. Reimer will be able to provide us. Okay. And that is my only question. Mr. Reimer, did you have any questions arising after that questioning?
No, not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's it for Mr. Barakas. Mr. Reimer, when you are ready, please, 321 de la Cathedral Avenue.
Thank you very much. So if we could initially please go to our main submission concerning the property. And Mr. Chairman, let me know when you get there, and if you could turn then briefly to page 8.
We are there.
Okay, so this is, there's no dispute factually as to the nature of the asset. It was built in, earliest was 1912 and then an addition in 2007. It is assisted living. There's a few comments I'd like to make with respect to some of the discussion that the panel members just had with Mr. Brokus. The kitchens are in fact limited. My understanding, and I'll be clear on this, I haven't inspected it, but my understanding was, in terms of these, in terms of the limited kitchens, we're not talking full stoves. We're talking, cooktop, obviously, and fridge. There is a central kitchen, and the meals are, Mr. Chairman, to your question, the meals are included. It's one of the business components that are included with it, in addition to several others, such as linen services and the shuttle service that Mr. Brokus talked about. So the meals are included. It is assisted living with limited kitchens. And one other thing I would just ask the board to take note of, again, there's no dispute factually on this, but to clarify, if you go to our page 16, which is our valuation for the subject. And pardon me, at the top of that, I believe it was Mr. Whitbread was looking at the unit sizes, but the bachelors are actually they're much smaller than I think had been referenced at 268 feet. The one bedrooms are 416, and the two bedrooms of the 10 two-bedroom suites are 707. So, pardon me, going back to Mr. Brokus and his recommendation, appreciate that he's recognized that those small suite sizes certainly merited an adjustment on the cap rate. Our adjustment goes somewhat further, but in principle, it's the very same thing. If you stay on page 16, then, so the net operating income is not under debate in this case. We are, however, suggesting a significantly higher capitalization rate of 6.25%. And that, just very briefly, going back to our page 14, my selection of the 6.25% cap was based on a number of factors. There is obviously very small suites. There's also, I'd suggest, an inferior suite mix with a high number of bachelors, and with the the original age of a portion of the components, that was also some factor, although it was more the suite mix and the suite sizes that had led me to my conclusion of 6.25%. So what I would propose to do, and again, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd propose to do this once as far as going through our capitalization rate evidence, ask that the comments that I have and any questions that come out of it be carried forward to the remainder of the hearing if we could. So if I could ask Mr. Chairman, if the board members, Mr. Brokus, could now refer to our capitalization rate study. And let me know when you're there, Mr. Chairman.
I am there. I'm not sure about the other panel members.
Sorry.
And Mr. Brokus, we're referring to the Altus cap rates study.
Yep, I got it.
Sorry, is everybody there now, Mr. Chairman?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just opening. Mr. Chair, we have seen this study in the past, and I'm wondering if Mr. Reimer would just be touching on highlights. He's not going to review the entire.
Indeed, yes.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Oh, okay. Ms. Whitbread, can I proceed? Are you there now?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Now, one question, or not question, one comment I would like to draw to the board's attention, and I will only go at the very high level. I do disagree with Mr. Broka's comments about the relationship between interest rates and capitalization rates. I'm not suggesting that's the sole determinant. It isn't. Capitalization rates are made up of a number of factors fundamentally, but one of those factors is does relate to interest rates, and to the extent that the key feature being the 5 and 10-year government bonds, to the extent that those rates change and especially when they change rapidly, as they did in the months leading up to the reference date, becoming significantly higher, those 5 and 10-year bond rates absolutely will have an impact on capitalization rates, in addition to the cost of money that Mr. Brokus did mention. If we could go briefly to our pages 8 and 9 in our capitalization rate study, and we've got a couple of charts that will illustrate this. So on page 8, you can see the correlation there between the 5-year and 10-year commercial mortgage rates, which relates to the cost of money, and the 5 and 10-year Government of Canada bond yields. So you can see that as the bond yield rises, predictably, the mortgage rates are also going to rise, and this is all a function of the Bank of Canada setting its interest rates according to their policy based on the economic conditions as they see it at the time. But then on page 9, again, the lower line, that what I'm going to call green, and I've been called basically colorblind, so in any event, it's the lower line on that chart. you can see again, it's not obviously a 1-to-1 ratio, but the trend lines are certainly very, very similar between the 10-year Government of Canada bond yields and capitalization rates. And it relates to, of course, to the extent that there are alternative investments with a 10-year bond yield being very much lower in terms of risk than purchase of real estate assets, for instance, which obviously are not linear. There's an element of risk involved. As the bond rates decline, capitalization rates did decline, and what was happening, of course, as of the reference date, is interest rates had spiked fairly significantly and quickly. And while there was a lag, I'd suggest between those 10-year bond rates and capitalization rates, certainly that would have an impact ultimately. And to the extent there was short-term compression between the bond rate and the capitalization rates, it does take a little while for the capitalization rates to reflect those changes, especially as rapid as they were. And I'd suggest to you that that is very much a consideration in selecting capitalization rates based on our specific reference date of April 1, 2023. So now again, and I am very cognizant, Mr. Chairman, that the board members have seen this study many, many times, so I'm going to go very high level. Page 12, please. So there are 5 transactions, pardon me, that we have put in our study. They range from 5.42% at the low end up to a high of 7.11% at the high end, relating to the most recent transaction for 677 Maryland. And I do note that in those of the 5 properties there were 2 transactions a month before our valuation date or our reference date, being 345 Talbot and 677 Maryland, and those indicated capitalization rates are between 6.48% and 7.11%. I'd suggest there's some certainly some element of the very quickly or very significant and quick rise in the interest rates impacting those cap rates. I won't go all of the supporting documentation starting on page 13 and onwards is included in our submission, so I do not propose to go through that at this stage, given the familiarity of the board members and Mr. Brokus with our study. But based on those specific indicators, and then again, having regard to the difficulty with these buildings that we're hearing for the most part this afternoon, with only a couple of exceptions, the income statements and the operating statements really don't bear any resemblance to market most of the time. Mr. Brokus was very forthright, and I share in those comments. The actual revenue being received, there's a substantial business component in that. If you think about this number of suites and 3 meals a day for 365 days a year, and then you talk about the linen services and the other services that are provided, it is a very substantial business component. And so references has not been made to those figures by either party because of the very, very significant business element. So what we did look at ultimately was the very small suite sizes, the limited kitchens, to some extent the older age, and the suite mix. And we've come in this case with a suggestion of 6.25% on our capitalization rate. So then, and now I'll leave the study and just briefly go back to our original submission. And this is again going back to page 16. So as you can see, they're using the net operating income that both parties are applying in this case of $998,468, capitalized at 6.25, then results in a value of $15,975,000, and that's our request this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, by the way, Mr. Chairman, I do have rebuttal, but I believe that then gets entered after questions of myself, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brokus, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Just looking at the picture, sorry, on page 7, just so we're clear about what's new and what's not. Would you agree that where we have the red marker, that rectangle, that encompasses the older structure?
Yes. Yes, exactly right.
Okay, and then the newer portion is over
It's
to,
the L-shaped buildings.
Yeah.
There, yep. Yep.
okay, so when I go to your, let me see this, I go to your page 16. It's indicated on gross floor area that you're only saying only 19,000, 15% was built in 2007, but
Yeah,
80
that's not right. You're right. That is
Yeah.
not, there's no way. That's not right. No.
Okay, so just to be clear, like, and I do have the square footages, just going back to what Mrs. Linklater was saying. Like, the majority of the building is new, it's not 1912, so just,
I agree.
yeah,
I
I just want to clarify that. Would you agree that St. Boniface is a good area for owning a rental?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And just looking at the cap chart on page 14. So we're not, you have this as an independent living. It says normally with a 0.5 to 3/4 point cap premium due to business component and limited seniors market, but we're not restricting our valuation to those parameters. Wouldn't that be correct?
Yeah, no. So to be clear, Mr. Brokus, these are comments that certainly I thought were relevant for consideration, but for me, the selection of the 6 1/4 was based on at the very bottom of that chart that you're referring to, the very, very small suite sizes and the poor suite mix, and the fact that they do have the limited kitchens. Because of course, theoretically, what we're trying to do is value this asset as a private market asset, and with those characteristics, certainly, if, for instance, a private investor were to take it back to the private market and stop using it in this manner, it would be exceptionally difficult to convert the suites, and especially considering the size, and that to me was the risk premium. So yeah, I'm not necessarily suggesting that it's always 0.5 to 0.75 with the business component, but in this case, that those were factors in how I got to it, the 6 1/4.
Okay. Just in regards to your cap rate study, is there a particular property that you determined was the most similar, and then you added premiums to it in order to get the 6 1/4? Just can you maybe clarify how that process took place?
Yeah, no, there was a couple of things I looked at, so that, and I'll be as you were, I'll be very forthright on this. So the property at 2390 McPhillip Street is certainly similar to the majority of this building in age. It's newer, but it's similar to the 2007 component, and that was showing under our calculations, I'm going to call it 5.6%. But recall, Mr. Brokus, where we disagree fundamentally, that's a transaction that was in October of 2020, and that spike in interest rates and the much higher yields on the bond rates and the impact on the cap were much more pronounced as of our reference date 3 years or 2.5 years later than in October of 2020, when rates were still at basically an all-time low. So when I look at that and the 100 Maryland Street again, that's obviously a much more significantly newer property with a 2017 build, 5.44% closer to the reference date, but still not there. So that unadjusted would represent, if this were a private market asset with full kitchens, with typical suite sizes, with a typical suite mix, then those transactions would represent, I think, an appropriate range. But between the adjustments that I'm suggesting for to reflect much higher interest rates and the alternate investments in bond rates, and also to reflect physical characteristics, that's why I went sort of from that range to the 6 1/4.
Okay, thanks. I have a gap rebuttal too that I'll go through very quick. I will ask that gets applied for all the properties. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
Yes. Does any part of this building have a historical designation?
You know, I designation, no, I don't believe it does. I looked at that as well, Mr. Whitbread, and Mr. Chairman. There is what the term was used was historical significance, but I do not believe it's actually been designated. So I'm going to say no, not that I'm aware of anyway.
Okay.
For the 1912 building, that obviously that is not the
That's
new
what I'm
stuff.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Second question, and then on page 8, clarify some confusion I have.
Sorry,
The
Mr.
block-
Whitbread, is it the cap study or the main brief, page 8?
Oh, sorry, it's page 8 on the main brief,
Okay.
and it's the last sentence on the first paragraph. Based on assessor data, 19,691 was built in 207. Did I hear the two of you talk about that as not being correct numbers?
Yeah, no, Mr. Brokus is absolutely right. There's that math. I'm not sure where I lifted that math from, but that's wrong. Because as Mr. Brokus had pointed out, the original 1912 building is the one that would be located furthest west, but then that those L-shaped structures, that would be to the north and east of the original building. That's the new stuff. Yeah, please disregard those proportions because they're just not right at all.
Neither one of you are able to tell us what this is in response to Ms. Reimer's question.
The
Proportions are for 1912 and 207.
You know,
Yeah, I
Actually,
have the
one-
square footage if you want. I have the square footage.
Would you
and-
put to us?
Mr. Brokus, can I just add, while Mr. Brokus is giving the areas, go to the last page of our brief on page 38, because that's where we do include the building details, and there's a breakdown between the 1912 buildings and the 2007. So sorry, Mr. Brokus, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, if you look on like page 38, that main floor, that 19,691, that is like one floor area. That's like the main floor, but there's like multiple levels. So I'll give the square footages. So for the newer area, it's 78,764. That's above ground. That's not counting any basement area. And then I've got 36,208 above ground for the 1912 that has a 1990 effective year built on it based on the permit like found at the end of my brief.
It's still short of the,
Oh, sorry. And then there's another one that's 2,436 square feet. That's also 1912. I have that submodel code apartment as well. Hopefully that gets us there.
it's getting closer. It's still short
Yeah,
by 10,000 square feet or so. but-
yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the pictures for the most part, it's newer. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's most clearly illustrated when you look at the pictures on my page 11, where it's kind of more of an angled shot. And you can see what's old and what's new.
Yeah.
What proportion it is anyway. But
Your numbers just added up to 117,000, not 127, which are being used in the evidence.
Mr. Chairman, I could actually help with that because I think, Mr. Whitbread, that difference might be the basement area. If you go to Mr. Brokus's brief on page 1, the gross floor area, that's shown 127,272, and Mr. Brokus, correct me if I'm wrong, but that includes the basement area of 9864, correct?
Yep, I see that here.
Yeah.
let me go back to my program here.
I'm guessing it does, and then we're actually almost bang on.
Almost. We're 3 square feet short.
Yeah, I can't help you with that, but yeah,
We can live
Mr.
with it.
Reimer's correct.
Okay.
That's the
thank you.
gross. Above ground and gross are two different figures.
Okay. I have no
Anything
further questions.
Okay, Mr. Barocas, okay, now that we're here, I hope you got those numbers. Can you provide me with, or us, with a percentage of new as opposed to old or original 1912 square footage?
Do you want it on a gross floor basis, or do you want it on an above ground basis?
Please.
Sorry, say it again?
Gross, please.
Gross, okay, well, let me add this up then, so 2, 4, 3, 6, 12. Okay, so I just have to flip between windows to find out what's what here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It's quite annoying. So what it looks like to me is that and 1.7272 equals this. So it looks like the 78,764, that's the new. That's new, so that's 61%. I don't believe there's basement area for that.
Okay, Mr. Reimer, would you agree with that approximately?
I would, yes.
Well, approximately 60% is new. My next question, Mr. Barocas, is what, in your opinion, is the effective age of this structure?
The effective age of the structure, well, when we're looking at, well, what structure, there's more than one structure.
The improvements on the property. What is the overall effective age?
Well, the 2007 edition has a 2007 effective age on it. And then if you look at my page one, the 1912 has a
Okay.
1990 effective age on it. So that's why there's a mix on the first page.
Wouldn't you come up with an average for the effective age of all the improvements on the property?
That's not how it's done in our system, and I haven't inspected it myself, so I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm just basically relaying what we have in our system based on our records.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, I'm going to ask you, any comments on what you think the effective age is on all the improvements?
I would not care to hazard a guess, Mr. Hutch, or Mr. Chairman, I should say. You know, it's obviously significant. 60% is 2007, and the old building, the original building, has been renovated to a large degree. So I'm not disagreeing at all with the, put it this way, with the effective age at this stage of the original building, which Mr. Brocas has as 1990. But beyond that, I wouldn't want to lead the board down the wrong path as far as some sort of mathematical calculation.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just have a further question that I would like to pose to both parties, please.
Yes, of course.
Do either of you gentlemen know if on the older portion of this property at 1912 has a stone foundation?
I do not. That's a good question. You know what? And yeah, actually, that makes perfect sense. But I don't know, Mr. Chairman, the answer to that question.
Neither do I.
All right. I thank you both.
Thank you. Okay, that's our questioning the applicant. I believe Mr. Barocas, you will go first with your rebuttal, please.
Yeah, I'll go real quick because I know we've gone through this before. So
Do we have this rebuttal?
Yes, it should be in the SharePoint as of, yeah, it should be in the SharePoint. Right in between the cap rate study. Might have to
There we
refresh
are.
it.
Yep, just before the apartment study. Yeah, okay.
Hmm,
Thank you.
no problem.
I'm just opening it. Got it.
Mr. Barocas, please.
Okay, so, and I've all seen this before, so I'll go quick. So basically our disagreement with the Altus cap rate study, a lot of it has to do with the lack of supporting information. Like many of the properties only have 1 year stabilized or no years at all. And the effective gross incomes reported don't match what Altus stabilized at. And then for 2390 McPhillips, like we're pretty identical on expenses, and you look at that, this stabilized income, I use the actuals, Altus use CMHC. And I mean, you change one number and look at the difference in cap rate between 4.7 and 5.6. So just want to make sure we get this entered into evidence. I ask that this rebuttal be carried forward through the remainder of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, any comments, questions of the rebuttal?
So the only, well, I don't really have, again, because the board is so familiar with this, I don't have a lot of questions per se, but shall I make some brief comments now or when I present my rebuttal, or I'm happy to do it either way?
Please make comments of the assessor's rebuttal.
Sure. So 1 year, and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brokus and the department certainly raised concerns that 1 year of income and expense information makes it unusable. I don't agree with that. I agree that it's not ideal, obviously. Typically, both the department and we will look at 3, perhaps 4 years of stabilized or of full information in order to complete the stabilization exercise. But 1 year's worth, where if that's the best information we have, and assuming that there's nothing, you know, the 1 year's operating expense should provide at the end of the day a very close baseline. Not as precise as if you have 3 years, but we just don't agree that it's unusable, and would ask the board still to consider it on its merits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the rebuttal? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. We will now go to Mr. Reimer's rebuttal, please. This is Mr. Mohan, this is on has been submitted?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Bear with us, Mr. Reimer, while we find it, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Should be again underneath the cap rate study, or right between the cap rate study.
Okay. Does everybody have it?
Just opening.
Mr. Reimer, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. So again, as Mr. Brokus had done, I'm going to go through this very high level because I know the board members and Mr. Brokus are intimately familiar with it already. The first page, a couple of pages, relates to what we believe is a very sort of stark indication of the investment alternatives. That the GIC rate is obviously a much different animal than the 5 and 10 year Government of Canada bond rate, but the GIC rates were higher still than a number of the capitalization rates that were the conclusions that were provided by the department, and we think that's certainly something to consider in the context of those cap rates. We had a number of other comments regarding some of the sales starting on page 4 and then continuing all the way through to the end of the rebuttal. Again, for the sake of brevity, I'm guessing the board members and Mr. Brokus are very, very familiar with our position. We would ask that this rebuttal be entered for the purpose of this hearing and for the remainder of the hearings for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barocas, any questions of the rebuttal presented by the applicant?
Yeah, just to be clear, on page 2, when you're comparing GIC rates to cap rates aren't a rate of expected return, though. Would you agree with that statement?
Cap rates are a rate of expected return, yes. Absolutely they are. At the end of the day,
Really?
they're at the end of the day, a capitalization rate reflects a number of things. There's a number of things that go into it: investment in alternatives, cost of money, risk in the property. But at the end of the day, Mr. Barocas, if I'm buying $1 million, what I think, put it this way, if I'm buying $100,000 in net operating income and I want a 10% return, then the price I'm willing to pay for that property is $1 million. So capitalization rates reflect the investor's expectations of a rate of return that they find appropriate. And if there's better investment alternatives with less risk, they will more than likely choose those other investments.
So how is it possible then? Okay, so with as the cap rate goes down, that indicates a better investment, right?
It will indicate less risk, but at the capitalization rate conclusion, Mr. Brocas, that's why I asked the question, posed the question before. You've done a great job of presenting the conclusions on the capitalization rates, but not the underlying data. So certainly there's a number of factors that go into it, but the capitalization rate would, in theory, certainly represent the rate of return that they want to get on the investment.
Well, I mean, that's why we disagree. What about other investments like the price of cryptocurrency? Do you consider that in terms of?
I have no idea of cryptocurrency. No, Mr. Brocas, going back to it. That's why, if you recall the charts from our capitalization rate study, that's why you see the correlation between capitalization rates and 10-year Government of Canada bond yields, is because the bond yield represents obviously a very, very safe investment alternative. And assuming that you're not buying the property to flip it, within a very short period of time, then you're looking at longer term investment alternatives, the safest one being the bond rate. But then when you start venturing into real estate, that presents more risk because it isn't linear. But to the extent that the bond rates are rising and you've got better investment alternatives for something that's very low risk, that risk premium will still be reflected in the cap rate, and that's why the two lines correlate.
So is a GIC, a bond, is that a physical asset that you can put people in and raise the rent and improve renovations and make a whole bunch of, can you subdivide a bond? Like, I don't see the correlation as someone who's looking into buying a bond and someone who's looking into spending millions of dollars on an apartment.
Okay, Mr. Reimer, Mr. Barocas, his opinion is it does affect it. Your opinion obviously is it doesn't.
Yeah.
So we'll just ask and answer it.
Okay, yeah,
Right?
All right, well, that's my questions for that. I've never heard a cap rate being referred to as a rate of return before, but that's all I got.
Sorry, and let me clarify. It's not a guaranteed rate of return. It's the return that the investor is expecting on the asset based on an assumed NOI.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the applicant's rebuttal?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Slater?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either. That concludes item number 1, 321 De La Cathedral Avenue. Next item on the docket is item number 2, file number 24-3054. Address is 101 Marion Street. And roll number is 60907 80,000. We're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barocas, bear with us 1 second, please. And we have no preliminary issues for this one. Is that right, Mr. Barocas?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. So when you're ready, please, 101 Marion Street.
All right. File number 24-3054, roll number 06090780000101 Marion Street. It is a Manitoba housing property, assessed value $15,446,000, 1973, 210 suites, 30 outdoor parking spots. Page 2, request for income information. No recent sales. Page 3 shows the breakdown. There's a lot of bachelor units in here. 31 bedrooms. We got this peg way down in our model. $781 on the rent. That's reflecting two things. It's reflecting the high number of bachelor units overall. And it's also reflecting the condition of the building. I know we inspected this a few years ago. Some of the building's not in good shape. Some of the units have been refreshed, but it's definitely below average in terms of condition. And that's why you're seeing sub $800 rents assigned by the model for an effective market date of March of 2023. So pretty low. 5 3/4 is the cap rate, 53% expense ratio for a 1973 property. So I mean, we got this pegged down. It's only $73,000 per unit. I've got the rent comps on page 4. Give me just 1 second here before I continue. I just want to take a quick look. So we have an agreement in terms of net operating income, so it is predominantly a cap rate discussion. So I'm not going to belabor rental rate discussion. If you go to page 6, though, you can see that we're only 88%. Of potential market rents as per CMHC. Cap rate evidence is on 8 and 9. And then we have remediac excerpts on page 10. Page 11 shows, and 12 shows the exterior of the building. And then page 13 shows a permit from 2010. Sprinkler additions, and door hardware changes, ventilation upgrades. On page 14, they did some windows in 2008. And on page 15, some interior alterations. It doesn't say what it is. It was only $29,000 on page in 2013. So 1973, we got a 5 3/4 cap, only 73,000 a unit, and rent less than $800 to reflect the condition and the suite mix. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor?
You know, given, and I'm gonna, for the sake of brevity and focusing the discussion, pardon me, I can confirm, Mr. Chairman, the only issue under examination for this hearing is the capitalization rate. So I would ask that the previous questions asked answered on the capitalization rate and as well as the rebuttal be carried forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mohan, is the rebuttal registered?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is model driven, correct, Mr. Baracus?
Yes.
All right, and so the model has given this property 5.75 cap rate, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And of course, no consideration that this is Manitoba housing because you're bringing it up to like a regular building, correct? Apartment building?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. And sorry, I think you said you inspected this building or somebody did?
Yeah, we took a look at it a few years ago. For some reason I couldn't find the pictures in this system. I know we did a walkthrough with Marcello, and we ended up settling a municipal board before the municipal board, and it was kind of like it wasn't in great condition. Some of the units were pretty beat. Some had been refreshed as tenants had moved out, and cap rate you see is the cap rate that we settle at. So
Right. And sorry, what year would that inspection have taken place? Do you have a note on that?
let me see here. It was probably like 3-4 years ago. 3-4 years ago would be my best estimation. But it was for an older, I think it was like for a 2018 unit board though.
All right. I thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
Just one, so the tenancy, would they be young people, seniors? What kind of tenants have you got in this building?
Current tenants,
Yes,
as far as I know, it's just subsidized housing. I don't know the demographics of it.
so
It's not something that we considered.
it's not a seniors living complex then,
I don't believe
to the
so.
best of your knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Reimer,
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
allow us to get brief, please. Sorry.
Certainly. And while you're getting to that material, Mr. Chairman, I can confirm what Mr. Broke has said as well. This is subsidized housing, but it's not a seniors facility. So just to get to that question initially. Let me know when you're there, Mr. Chairman.
I am there.
All right.
When you're
So
ready.
again, thank you. For the sake of brevity, ask the board members and Mr. Broke has turned to our page 15. So as I had mentioned earlier, the debate in this case hinges on the capitalization rate. We have applied a 6.25% rate in this case. And again, it's similar to the last property, that last property being a seniors facility, but similar to the last property to the extent that it's a very, very high degree or high proportion, I should say, of bachelor suites. Just to go through that briefly, I'll get the exact numbers. There's a total of 210 suites. 179 of the 210 are bachelor suites, 31 bedroom and only 1 2-bedroom. Now, the distinction here, of course, though, is that these are full suites. They have full kitchens, so that is certainly a difference. But the suite mix, pardon me, is in our view inferior. And they are smaller. The bachelor suites are 350 square feet, and the 1-bedrooms are 580. So, typical with subsidized housing. It's a matter of certainly trying to maximize the number of units within a given building, and that's reflected in the smaller suite sizes. The other thing I'd like to point out to the board just briefly, on the very last page of our materials, page 33, this is a property that has had and has very, very substantial deferred maintenance items, as you can see on page 33. What they're calling the short-term sort of the 3-year horizon. Totaled 5.2 million or 5,283,000. So that certainly the deferred maintenance is and the condition. And Mr. Broke has been very forthright in terms of his views on the condition. It's not ideal, and that also went into our consideration when selecting the 6.25% cap rate. So for all those reasons, and based on the previous review of the cap rate study and the rebuttal, we ask that the board apply 6.25% in this case, with the requested value then being 14,210,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant?
Not right now, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the applicant?
Just one. Have you added a premium to this cap rate based on the condition of the building or location or anything else?
The condition of the building, yes. Not location, but the condition, yes, with the significant deferred maintenance. And it's obviously, it's always subjective to that extent, but with a 5.2 million deferred maintenance bill coming up in the short period, that's why the 6.25% is there.
So what would you put on that, a 0.25 premium?
A 0.25 would be my sort of take on it as well.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And neither do I. It's noted that both rebuttals have been submitted as evidence, and the altered cap rate study has been submitted as evidence. Any requirement for summary, Mr. Barocus?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item number 2, 101 Marion Street. Next item on the docket is item number 3, file number 24-1653. Address is 86 Niagara Road, roll numbers 0800-216-6800. And we're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barocus, you can wait for us to get your brief off, please, for 86 Niagara Road. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready, please.
File 24-1653. Roll number 08002166800, 86 Niagara Road. Assessed value 11,381,000. It is a 2011 property, 50 suites, 58 indoor parking, 12 outdoor parking. Page 2 shows a request for income information. Page 3 shows the income value summary: 14 one bedroom, 36 two bedroom, 50 total units in all. 1,587. 4.85 cap rate, 39% modeled expense ratio. Then we've got rental comps on page 4. So you can see the other apartments in the area, mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, average monthly rent is in and around what the models is assigned to 86 Niagara. Cap rate evidence again found on page 5. Page 6 is also a cap rate chart. Page 8 shows the permit for the building back in 2010, 5.3 million. And we got some aerial pictures. It's a 55 plus. And then we've got some features on page 10 as well. And then the outside and inside of the building based on promotional photographs. So I mean, it looks typical for a normal apartment. And then we've got the let me see here. The mailer on page 15 and 16 and 17. So overall, newer build 2011, 227 per unit, which is similar to what, if you look at page 5, 2390 McPhillips, regardless of what you think the cap rate should be, we're at 227. That one sold in 2020 for 215. So we're right around the mark there. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Can you give us the value, please?
11,381,000.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
Just one, Mr. Barocas, page 3, please. And just to clarify or to reinforce, this is model driven from top to bottom, correct, including cap rate?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Questions asked and answered on cap rate and rebuttal, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread.
I just want to confirm, February 2010, there was a sale of 600,000. Would that likely have been land purchase?
Most likely, yes.
And then did I hear you say there's a permit for 5.3 million in 2011, 2010 for the building?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus, on page, the income and expense statement on page 15.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, I guess my question is the mortgage and interest is applied to reduce the net operating income. Would that be, in your opinion, is that not allowed?
Yeah, that's not how valuation is done.
Okay,
We don't include that, like, I mean, like these properties, they're purchased, with, like people have to borrow money with them, and that's, I'm sure, part of the consideration. No
just
one's,
trying to,
yeah, no one, as far as I know, no one's taken out loans to buy GICs.
yeah. I'm just trying to determine the actual net operating income with that question. So, okay, that's answered. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Yeah, it's also like a 55. That's right. When you go to page 11, like it's a 50 plus, so it's not quite open market to anyone.
Yeah.
So one with the model. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That is all my questions, Mr. Reimer. When you are ready, please.
Page 14 of our submission, please.
Bear with me one moment, please. Okay, we are there. Page 14, is that what you?
Yes,
Right.
indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So this actually is a private market apartment complex, Mr. Chairman. So we did have reference to the stabilized or to the operating results from 2021 and 22. As you can see on that page, stabilized column shows a potential market gross rent of 877,200, which is taken from the 2022 questionnaire. Then putting in the vacancy, but then adding back in the parking, which is significant, and some miscellaneous revenue. The effective gross income is that we're calculating is 901,138, which actually is not all that far off the mark from the department's model-driven EGI of 918,230 or 123. There's a more significant difference in the expenses. As you can see there, we're applying a stabilized expenses totaling 400,190, as shown in that column, which equals an expense ratio of 44.4%. The resulting NOI is 500,949. Again, that's roughly 51,000 lower than the NOI calculated by the department's model based on our stabilization of those 3 years of operating results. We're applying a capitalization rate of 5.25% at the lower end of our range in this case, and based on that and the evidence submitted in the cap rate study, the requested value is 9,542,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Brokus, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Yeah, just pardon me, just quick on page 14. Why did you opt to go with a 3.6 vacancy instead of the 3-year average?
Certainly, I think the 3-year average on balance would not represent a balanced market, but your point's well taken, Mr. Brokus. The 0.9% is in fact a 3-year average.
Okay, so then, if they're performing better than market vacancy, would it be fair to say that it's the stability of the tenancy would be above average, like there's less risk?
If one assumes that the vacancy rates are going to remain at that level, absolutely. But don't forget, Mr. Brokus, it's a prospective looking valuation. So the 0.9%, I don't believe would represent a balanced market, or an investor would see that as a sufficient reserve for vacancy. Things fluctuate, can and do certainly fluctuate with vacancies along with all the other parameters. So I do not, I'm not suggesting, and I don't believe an investor in a property like this would choose something as low as 1% or 0.9%. But certainly there's a significant gap between 3.6 and 0.9. That I am agreeing with you on.
Yeah, and just with that statistical, historical, better than average vacancy, do you think they might conclude that would put, if they are adjusting the vacancy to 3.6, that advantage might be pushed towards downward pressure on the cap.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so if we're gonna move the vacancy up higher than it's lower than market vacancy, that advantage still exists. Would they not think of it, well, maybe there's less risk, maybe the cap rate should be lower?
Mathematically, yes, but I draw your attention to this, Mr. Brokus, and this gets to the very core of what we're talking about in terms of the stabilization. If you look on the actual operating results in 2020, the actual NOI was 523, but in 2021 it was 488, and in 2022 was 511,000. So you can see there, and that's with very low vacancy rates. The vacancy in 21 was a bit higher, but all these things fluctuate, Mr. Brokus. So you can't isolate a vacancy and then just say that's got an immediate effect on cap, because actually the 3-year average of the actual operating results, taking it all into account, is 507,000, which is reasonably close to our stabilized amount, but much, much lower than the department's model-driven NOI. So you can't, I'd suggest to you, you can't just look at that one factor. And the 500,000 relative to the bottom line, the NOI for the 3 years is very consistent in what we're suggesting.
Right. And this, to be clear, this isn't open, this isn't like a fully open market apartment for anybody to rent.
You have to meet the criteria, but it's a private market, fully private market property where the rents are being dictated by the market with a 2011 build, and you know, the targeting to the call it seniors or 55 plus. So yeah, it's fully on the private market, and is actually with the vacancy rate that seems to have picked up some traction.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the applicant?
Just confirming, if the 55 plus suites, are they standard suites with a normal kitchen?
Yeah,
or
oh
a
yes,
regular
yes,
kitchen?
yes.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
yep, 100%.
Thank you. No other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Brokus, requirement for summary?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reiner?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 386 Niagara Road. We shall do one more. Item number 4, file number 24-1427. Address is 395 Beaver Hill Boulevard. Dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal, roll numbers 06093309-400. Mr. Brokus, when you are ready, please, 395 Beaver Hill.
Okay, let me pull this up quick. All right, file 24-1427, roll number 06093309400395 395 Beaver Hill Boulevard. So this property is assessed at 12,008,000. It's a seniors 55 plus life lease property. It is, just let me double check. It's a not-for-profit life lease, according to the literature, which can be confirmed on page 13. So 1997, effective year built 1997, 71 suites, 60 indoor parking, 23 outdoor parking. Actually, you know what, I looked at the pictures just of the interior of it. I'm gonna do a slight bump to the cap. I'm gonna bump the cap to 5.25 on the model NOI. So if you follow me to page 3, and then I'm gonna use 618,428 with a 5.25 cap. Small bump, but I do think 5.15 might be a little bit too low based on the pictures. And that's gonna amend the assessed value to 11,780,000. And then I'll just pause there and then keep going.
Okay, Mr. excuse me, Mr. Reimer, any comments regarding the recommendation?
Appreciate the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, that we're still a wee bit apart, so a request to continue on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready, please.
All right. So page 3, just for the breakdown here, 10 1-bedroom, 54 2-bedroom, 7 3-bedroom, 71 total units. Average monthly rent per unit, $1,341. And then we've got our parameters here. It's 55 plus. It's a life lease. People pay entrance fees to get in there. Life leases, they can buy down their rent. They get the entrance fee refunded when they leave. So with life leases, we don't consider what they're reporting as market rent because there is like a reserve fund, which is taken from the refundable tenant entrance fees, which a bigger contribution will cause the respective tenant to pay less month over month. And that's not how a normal apartment works. That, and it's a closed market, 55 plus. And according to his literature, it's not for profit. So we're not looking at the actuals on it, just on with the model. We've got our comparables on page 4. So we are within the range of the comparables, mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms. Then CMHC analysis, again, page 6, we're right on what CMHC is saying the market rent ought to be. Source charts on page 7, cap rate evidence on page 8 and 9. So again, 2390 McPhillips, we got it at 4.7. I'm saying it should be a half point higher. It's older, and what little pictures they have online show that it's more basic than newer builds, which would have newer finishes and perhaps better amenities. So I think it should be a good half point higher. Then we've got construction, or sorry, a permit on page 11. Exterior alterations to involve concrete and masonry repairs to all the balconies, including the guardrail removal and putting in some new ones and installing a waterproof membrane to the tune of 1.8 million. So it looks like they've done some, you know, good level of maintenance there. And we got a picture from the aerial on page 12. Then a description of the operation on page 13. So quiet living and convenience, non-profit, 55 plus life lease. Close to St. Vital Center. As a shared common room, underground parking. Again, that's good asset to have. It's in a good area. You can see the pictures that I was able to find online. They don't have a lot of great pictures online, unfortunately. This looks like the communal kitchen on page 15, and they got it looks like a woodworking shop for its the tenants, but it was short on bedroom, bathroom, living room pictures. The picture at the bottom of page 14 is what I could find, unfortunately. When I look at that picture, it doesn't look like modern styling to me. So I think based on its overall age and the information I have, I think it should be 5.25, not closer to 5%. Then page 16 shows how there are refundable entrance fees, tens of thousands of dollars, and also shows the suite sizes as advertised online. So again, recommendation 5.25 cap model NOI, 11,780,000 That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor?
Again, Mr. Brokus on page 3, and you need not turn there, but it's up until your recommendation, all of the parameters from PGI down to capitalization rate were all model driven.
Yes.
Okay, now, so the expenses specifically, the model driven expenses were, pardon me, were 483,153. Did you have a chance to review the actual expenses of the property in preparation for this hearing for the years 2020 and 2022 that are in our submission?
Yeah, I didn't, because it's a not-for-profit, I didn't look at the actual income and expense statement.
Oh, okay. So neither the income nor the expenses. All right. Mr. Chairman, questions asked and answered on cap rate, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And rebuttal?
And rebuttal, please. Yes, please.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Yes, I wonder if I can explore this life lease issue with you a bit. So if I understand it, your evidence says a person would have to pay an upfront refundable entrance fee before they go in. And what that would do is allow them a reduced monthly rental fee. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, with life leases, it's refundable. Like when you leave, you get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more you pay, the lower your rent will be. Like you can choose to pay more than the minimum, and then you'll get rewarded by paying less rent on a monthly basis.
I understand that. And have you factored that into this $1,341, or has the model factored that into the $1,341 rent?
Well, we're not valuing it like a life lease. We're valuing it like a normal for-profit apartment that's not age restricted, and it's run on a for-profit basis. So I didn't consider the actuals.
Okay, but it is collecting money from these people at the front end.
Yep.
And let's just say between 36 and 55, a $40,000 investment on a person's part. That would equal, if all of the tenants, 71 tenants, paid that, to about $2,800,000.
I mean, I'll take your word. Take your word for it.
Except my calculations, they're rough, and that's a rough calculation on this. Notwithstanding that, there's interest earned on that money. So every year, that $2.8 million is earning a rate of return on some bank account somewhere, or investments. And
we've had this conversation. I know Carrie and I have had this conversation.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, we almost had a muni board hearing over this, but we're factoring in, but we're not factoring in our valuation. We're just going with the model, regular for-profit apartment. It's like a reserve fund for them to have to fix up things that they need to do. But I'm sure it's not just sitting in a safe somewhere. They're probably earning revenue off of it.
Well, what it's doing is it's helping to reduce the rent every month for the people that live there. That's what I assume. What I'm wondering about is, and let's just say it was a 5% interest earned on that money, 2.8 million. What is that, $140,000? You don't show that anywhere in the revenue. Nobody does. Why is that?
I mean, you'd have to talk to them.
Well, I'm talking to you because you've put this evidence in front of us and you haven't included it in the revenue.
That's because I'm not using their actual revenue.
But you're using an income approach here.
Yes, an income approach as a normal apartment, not a 55 plus not-for-profit life lease.
Okay, so not
that question you could ask that question again to the agent and see maybe what they say, because they are using the actual.
I will. Yeah, I will. Okay, so you've disregarded that or not included that in this calculation.
Yeah, just like a Manitoba housing property or any kind of non-market operating entity we have to value it on like a for-profit, highest and best use basis. So we're just pushing that aside and saying, well, what would it be if it was just a straight up apartment?
But in some cases you do, Matthew. I've seen this where you've provided the subsidized amounts, not you in particular, but the department has provided subsidies when it is an emergency. But let's leave it there. For this property, I understand what you've done. Thank you.
I certainly have not and would not, just to make that clear for the record.
Okay.
Thank
No
you.
further questions.
Ms. Linklater, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Reimer,
Thanks,
allow-
Mr. Chair.
find your brief, please.
Okay.
395 Beaver Hill Boulevard. When you are ready, please.
Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of comments based on my review of the evidence of Mr. Brokus in the discussion just now, but I'll start off. The question had been posed about, the interest that's being earned on it, but recall, and Mr. Brokus had referred to this as well in terms of the replacement reserve and the requirements to have that reserve for the sort of more significant expenses that arise. So if you turn briefly to our page 20, and for the reasons I'm about to suggest, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to belabor this, but if you turn to our page 20, you can see the very last item, replacement reserve expense of 176,500, and certainly the interest that's being earned on these life leases is going to go to those types of expenses. So it wouldn't have what it would do is have the effect of preserving the asset to a very large degree, but not, I don't believe it would be the case that it would have a significant impact on reducing the rent year in and year out. Because of course, as the building gets older, you do have to get into some of these very significant repairs, and the reserve fund has to be there in order to facilitate those repairs. So having said that, though, and the reason I said I'm not going to belabor it, could we turn to our page 14, please, Mr. Chairman? So you can see on page 14 the potential market gross rent that we have applied in our valuation is $1,024,000. Pardon me, with a 3.6% vacancy, and then the additional items shown there to result in an EGI of $1,024,000. I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave the request there as it stands with that income and the expenses of $582,909, resulting in an NOI of $441,475, capped at 5.5%, results in a value of $8,027,000. But I'm going to offer this as an alternative because the points being raised here are certainly well received. I'm going to suggest that an alternative for the board to consider would be to apply an effective gross income based on the data, the market data presented by Mr. Brokus of $1,101,581. But I would be very clear on this. I'm suggesting that the expenses that are shown on the statement or the page 14, the stabilized expenses in or near 582,909 would be appropriate to apply along with the market rent. These are the actual expenses, as you can see in 2020 and 2022, of between 591,000 in 2020 and 2022 it was 556,000. So we've stabilized it overall at 582,909. So again, if the board and Mr. Brokus can have their pens ready. So if you take the 1,101,581 EGI, deduct the expenses of 582,909, that results in a revised NOI of 518,472, capped at 5.5%, would result in a revised requested value of 9,430,000. So I'd request that the board consider the reductions in that range of between 8,027,000 as shown on page 14 and the alternate value of 9,430,000 using the stabilized expenses, but the market parameters for the EGI. This is another case where, yeah, obviously you can see again on page 14 at the top what the property is accounting for as market rents is only 359,000, obviously not at market, and even then adding in the common area charges, it's still only $1,024,000. So I'm suggesting to to have the board members consider the 1,101,581 as an EGI makes certainly stands to reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Would you mind providing your adjusted net operating income?
Yes, the adjusted NOI would be 518,672,
All right.
and then capped at 5.5%. And the precise value that comes out of that is 9,430,400, rounded to 9,430,000.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Brokus, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Okay, so just that last figure, is that your new figure and you're disregarding the 8,026,000?
I'm not disregarding it, Mr. Brokus, but I'm certainly cognizant of the comments you made and also the comments of the panel members. So it makes sense as an alternate request to me.
Okay, so okay, on page 14 here. This building's got 60 indoor parking and 23 outdoor parking spots. When I look at the parking on a stabilized basis, does that seem pretty low if it was, operated on a for-profit basis, open to anybody, would you say?
100%. 100% it is low. $1,600 in a year for that number of parking spots is low.
Yeah, because like indoor parking spots, they could go $100 on 50, $100 conservatively probably, and then you multiply that. So okay.
I don't have any data on the parking revenue, Mr. Brokus, but I'm agreeing with you that it's low. $1,600 is low.
Okay. And then the utilities, they would be included in the rent based on the operation. Is that correct?
Well, if you're like when taking a look at it as a life lease asset, I believe they are, but that's not the way you or I are valuing it. So
right. And then typically our utilities, they're not typically included in rental rates. Would that be fair to say? They would be paid by the tenant.
The water is often included, and to some degree, certainly depending on the how new the structure is, electricity typically is like that's metered separately and the tenants pay that, but water is very commonly included. And for the older buildings, other utilities are included as well. For the newer stuff, not so much. So I would agree to that extent.
Okay. And then does 1,700 a unit for a 1997 building seem a bit on the high side on the R&M?
As of April 1st, 2023, not necessarily, no.
Okay.
Not necessarily, because as I say, and you pointed this out as well, this is a not-for-profit. And so these folks are not going to be putting in more money in the R&M than they need to. And as you can see on that chart, it ranged between 120, call it 126.5 in 2022 to just a tick under 140 for 2020. So I believe the stabilized at 120,746 is certainly fair.
Okay. And then just last question, like in terms of the replacement reserve expenditures, 71,000 in 2020, and then do you know what that was, what they used that money for? Like,
I don't, well, the quick answer would be is I don't, but I also, if you note there, we're using zero for the state, like we haven't included any part of that in our stabilized expenses. So I can certainly look at it, Mr. Brokus, but it's not included in our evaluation or calculation of the stabilized expenses.
okay. Yeah, those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. My only question, Mr. Reimer, page 14, item number 30. You've chosen in your expenses for real estate taxes 104,000 as opposed to 22 declaration of 82,000. Can I ask why it would be much higher than the is declared?
That is a very good question, Mr. Chairman. If I could have a moment, please. I'm looking well. No, the amount shown on the statement is 83,202. So my only comment, Mr. Chairman, is I'm guessing that it was expected based on the reassessment cycle and such that the property taxes were going to rise, but I cannot to your question give you a precise answer as to how the 104,403 what that would be derived from. So it's a very good question, and I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, so normally, I believe your procedure would be to declare that 2022 declared amount at 82,300 approximately. Normally when I see spreadsheets, that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly. So the 2022 would be based on the actual tax bill paid in May. And conceptually, as I say, if with the new assessments coming out and the revisions in the values, I believe what's happened is the calculations have been made based on what was known as of the reference date. But if the board was inclined to go with the actual 22s, the 82,302, I mean, I understand what I understand the board's perception that way.
Okay. So would it be fair to add 22,000 approximately to the NOI?
It would make sense to me.
Okay. All right. That was my only question. Okay. Mr. Brokus, any requirement for summary?
I mean, it's just like it's a closed market in terms of age restriction to life lease, so it's atypical operation. And it's a not-for-profit. That's why we didn't take a look at the expenses. We're not sure they're operating in a manner to maximize their return. So I asked that you go with my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer.
Mr. Chairman, it's not a summation as much as I now realize what that difference is that you just asked about the taxes. So this property is taxable school exempt. And that the methodology that we've applied in the past is if this is being valued as a standard, market apartment, the code 20 multifamily residential taxes that would derive from that are significantly higher. So I'm going to revise my answer to you, Mr. Chairman, because that will be the difference between the actual taxes of, call it 82,000, and our stabilized amount. Our stabilized amount being based on the property being fully in the private market and not having the taxable school exempt designation with it. That would be the difference. I'll leave it with the board to consider what that means in terms of the value, and no other summation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. That concludes item number 4395 Beaver Hill Boulevard. We're going to take an 8-minute recess, please, Mr. Mohan.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan. I'll now call the hearing back to order. Next item on the docket is item number 5, file number 24-1950, roll number 0600-690-4000. And the address is 91 Willow Lake Crescent. We're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment appeal. And it's noted that the assessor has made a recommendation. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready, please.
Okay, thanks. File 24-1950, roll number 0600-690-4000. 91 Willow Lake Crescent. Original assessed value was 11,441,000. It's built in 73, 5 buildings, 2 stories, 96 suites, 102 outdoor parking spots. I made a recommendation to reduce the assessment to 11,061,000. If you follow me to page 5, got the calculations here. So basically what I did is I looked at, we had the gross potential too high in the model. We were at 1,373,772. When I looked at the mailer, they were only reporting, much less than that. So what I did is I used the 2022 reported potential gross income. And then I used the market vacancy. They were reporting a much higher vacancy in 2022 and in previous years as well. I took a peek at 2023 and market vacancy was only 32,000. So I just went with the market vacancy of 3.6 on it. Then I added reported laundry, parking, and miscellaneous. To get to the effective gross income, I applied the City of Winnipeg expense ratio of 51.62 and a 5.6 cap to calculate my recommendation of 11,061,000. I'll just take a break there and then I'll keep going.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reimer, any comments on the recommendation made by the assessor?
Apologies, I appreciate the recommendation, but we're still a wee bit apart, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready, please continue.
Okay. Page 3, 96 suites, 24 one bedroom, 72 two bedroom. So we got I guess we're kind of starting off at the expense ratio now. So 51.62 as per the model. And then we've got 5.6 for a 1973. So it's a pretty healthy cap rate in my opinion, based on the property and the area that it's in. Rent comps were on page 4, but I amended the rent to what they reported the potential as being. My recommendation is on page 5. Cap rate stuff is 6 and 7. So what does the property look like? On page 9, you go onto the website and kind of gives you an idea of what it's like. It looks like it has some units have balconies. It's like a longer retention pond and a more private residential type setting. So it's like a pretty nice area actually. So like somewhat garden style apartments, and you can flip through the pictures. Interior pictures start on page 11. So I mean, it looks like it's been well maintained. It doesn't look like it's been renovated to the extent where I'd consider putting an effective age on it. But it looks like, at least on the promotional photos, they're on top of the repairs and maintenance. And then we have the mailer on page 14, 15. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor?
Thanks. So, Mr. Barocas, we'll just turn to your page 5 briefly. This is the recommendation page.
Yeah.
So again, the PGI is the reported 2022. The market vacancy you've applied is 3.6. So that's the department's overall market rate for properties similar to this for the entire city, is it?
Yeah, more or less. It might vary per region, market region, but it's around the 3.6.
Okay. And the expenses that you've applied. Oh, I see. So you took the revised EGI and then you applied the same expense ratio, I believe, of 51.6 to that amended EGI, correct?
Right. I thought the R&M might be a bit high at 255,919. That's 2,600, 65 a unit. So I wasn't sure what was going on with the vacancy, if there was a connection between that and the R&M. So I just went with the 51%.
Okay. And the cap rate is model driven at 5.6. He didn't change that at all then, correct?
Yes, correct.
Mr. Chairman, questions asked and answered on cap rate and rebuttal, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the assessor?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater.
I also have none. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have none either. Mr. Reimer, allow us to get to your brief, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Reimer, when you're ready, please, 91 Willow Lake Crescent.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Page 14, please. So with the, and I'm just going to incorporate Mr. Barocas' revised valuation coming in at the 11,061,000. So this is coming down to a couple of items now, not the PGI. We're using the same PGI, but certainly the vacancy rate is at issue. And I'm going to ask the board to disregard Mr. Barocas' comments about looking at 2023. It's not relevant to this hearing. The municipal board's been very clear. Post-reference information shall not be taken into account. I will comment further on the vacancy issue in a moment. So vacancy is one of the points where we're still different. And the expenses, there's some differences as well, although not nearly as pronounced as they sometimes are. So in terms of the vacancy, if you look on our page 14 towards the top, you can see that between the actual vacancies, which were between 9.3% in 2020 to a high of 16% in 21, and then back down to 11.9% in 2022. The 3-year average being 12.5%, and then on top of that yet, there were some bad debts, as you can see listed there. So we've applied a stabilized vacancy, certainly higher than the market, because the property's performance was certainly suffering as far as the vacancy rate goes. We've used 7.5%. Based on the admissible evidence between 2020 and 2022. That's all inclusive of both the actual vacancy and the bad debts. So that then, but then when you factor in laundry and parking, as shown there, and miscellaneous income, we come in at an effective gross income of 1,229,215. That then is certainly significantly lower than Mr. Barocas' revised calculation, that being due to the differences in the vacancy allowance. Then the expenses, as you can see there, stabilized are 675,956. Mr. Barocas had made a comment about the actual R&M in 2022, and as you can see there, we're using an R&M expense of 201,868, which is substantially lower than the 2022 reported actual amount of 256. So we believe we're being very fair there. And with the remainder of the expenses as shown and stabilized there, the total expenses are 675,956, resulting in an NOI of 553,258. In this case, very little to choose from is between the cap rates. Mr. Barocas confirmed the 5.6 model rate. We're at 5.75, but the more significant issue in this case relates to the NOI calculation, stabilized NOI, and within that, the primary reason for the difference now is vacancy. And for those reasons, we would request a revision to a value of 9,622,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Excuse me, Mr. Barocas, any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just on page 28. This regarding the vacancy, is this a note to the department from the owner explaining
Yes.
the vacancy situation?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, so it said that in 2019 the vacancy was 3.6, but then because of the pandemic, and again, unless I'm reading this incorrectly, it jumped substantially to 15.8.
Indeed, that's exactly what it says.
Okay.
Yeah, you're looking at the bottom line, correct? The bottom two lines? Yes.
Right, yes. Yep. Okay, so we're looking at an effective date of April 1st, 2023. Given this is a long-term investment, and at that point we've already pretty much, come out of the pandemic, would it make sense that the owner would sell the property, would market the property at a lower sale price based on a short-term vacancy event that has already come and gone?
Well, I'd suggest a couple of things, Mr. Barocas. So recall that we're not suggesting the use of the 16 or the 12%. We're taking the 3-year average. And so if an investor is going to buy it, if there's problems that are persisting, because by 2022, of course, we were coming out of the pandemic, and yet the vacancy rate was still nearly 12%. So I'm agreeing with you, they wouldn't be using 12 or 16% as a stabilized vacancy, but neither are we. So I'd suggest the 7.5%. Again, recall from Broadway Square, with the site-specific analysis, you know, each assessment cycle and the start of each assessment has to be based on consideration of what was happening leading up to the reference date. Certainly, and you've alluded to it, which I'm suggesting was not relevant to this hearing, but certainly if the vacancy rate had gone down, that's going to be reflected in the departments and presumably our valuation for the next reassessment as well. So you've characterized it as an event. I don't agree with that entirely. It was a very set of unusual circumstances, but we're trying to factor that in our analysis using the much lower rate of 7.5% instead of, you know, the 3-year average of 12.5 or the actual 2022 at 12%.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the applicant?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Ms. Linklater?
I also have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Barocas, any requirement for summary?
For the sake of hopefully getting out of here on time, I do not.
Mr. Reimer?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 5, 91 Willow Lake Crescent. And next item on the docket, item number 6, file number 24-3597. Address is 180 Worthington Avenue, dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barocas, when you are ready, please.
One moment, please. I just got to get the briefs open. Okay, sorry, I just have to get mine open. I always glance at the applicants first to try and not be redundant, but I've got it open now. So file 24-3597. Roll number 08021080900180 180 Worthington Avenue, Riverside Lions Seniors Residences. So we've got an assessed value of 9,827,000. It's a 2008, 75 suites, only 2 outdoor parking spots. So I'm actually going to make a verbal rec on this one. If you go to page 3, now you see we got a 4.5 cap rate on it. And again, look at the breakdown. It's mostly bachelor units. It's an assisted living. So I'm going to use the modeled rate, the model NOI of 447,122. And then I'm going to use a 5.5 cap on it. So this 4.5 is way too low. So if you look at Dela Cathedral, I believe I recommended a 5.5 on that. I'm giving this one a 5.5 too. It's a seniors assisted living with a, you know, mostly bachelor unit heavy breakdown. So the result is 8,129,000. I'll stop there and then I'll keep going.
Read that again, please.
Mr. Barocas, the final revised recommendation is 8,129,000.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Mr. Reimer, any comments?
Again, I appreciate Mr. Barocas' recommendation, and the gap in the respective valuations has narrowed, but there still is a bit of a gap. So would you just ask to proceed, please?
Thank you. Mr. Barocas, please proceed.
Okay, yeah. Page 3, 48 bachelor, 27 one bedroom, 75 units total, 924.96 on the average monthly rent, 43% expense ratio. Then I bumped the cap to 5.5. Comps are on page 4. So the average monthly rents are much higher. I had a hard time finding comps for this. In this age group, typically they're not bachelor heavy. So admittedly, the comps are not that good. So on page 5, I did do the CMHC rent analysis as well. 3 factors reviewed: area, age, and overall unit count. Looks like we're 97.77% of what CMHC is coming out at. And looks like the rent for the year category analysis is much higher than the zone and the building count, because it is a 2008. Source tables on page 7. Page 8 shows the cap rate charts, 8 and 9. Then you zip ahead here to page 11. Just the construction permit, 6.5 million in what, 2007. Then you got an aerial picture and a street view picture on page 12, and then we've got a description of the operation on page 13. So Lions Estates housing project to assist seniors wanting or needing additional support services such as meals and housekeeping within their environment. It is school tax exempt. So again, not looking at the revenue that they reported. It shows the services that are involved here. A social and leisure program description on page 14, and then on page 15 does give the square footages, and again, those rental rates include the aforementioned amenities on the preceding pages, if you want to take a look through that, but we're not considering those rental rates. And the hydro, water, heat, and air conditioning are included. Outdoor parking, 50 a month, which is more like a model rate actually. And then the remainder of the brief is just the financials. So one thing is to be noted here on page 15, you can see how the square footages of the units, they're not big. It says they're only 565 for 1-bedroom units. For 1 occupant and 2 occupants, they have them as the same size. So that's small. That's something that I considered when putting the cap to 5.5 for a 2008, just like I did for Beulah Cathedral. So recommendation 8,129,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
Just ask the cap rate information, asked and answered, please, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'll have more to say in my direct.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the assessor?
Yes. So you say it's a seniors living facility. And when I look at page 15, it looks like meals are included. Do you know if they have to take the meals or is it an option?
I do not.
Do you know if they have regular kitchens or minimized kitchen?
I don't know. I was looking, I was trying to
Oh.
find throughout the pictures, but maybe the applicant might be able to.
I'll be able to answer that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So an investor looking at this property with, what did you say? I think 565 square foot apartments. And we're Willow Lake Crescent. It's that a little bit off the beaten path, isn't it? It's not near a university or a hospital. It'd be more,
Worthington?
yeah, sorry, I'm not familiar with. I have to look on the map. You don't have.
1E Worthington, I think that's St. Vital. So that's like St. Vital off St. Anne's. Just, it's north of one block north of Bellevaux,
Right.
like,
So it's across McGilvery though. New
no,
name,
like Bishop Grandin. It's like really close to Bishop or Abinogi.
Bishop Grant, okay. All right. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater?
Yes, Mr. Barocas, you did not inspect this property, correct?
No, unfortunately, I haven't attempted to inspect anything.
Okay. Do you know when it was last inspected?
I do not.
All right. And again, you have given a recommendation because you feel the model is incorrect on this property, correct?
Yeah, 4 or 5 is wrong for sure.
Or just like on property number 1, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Being because the model does not take into consideration the poor mix of suites and or the size, correct?
Yeah, it's the size of the units, and that was my main thought. Those are really small units and they're bachelors. So if we're looking at the rent at being, 7% of what CMHC is cranking out, if I'm not going to adjust that, then I think that the cap rate should be adjusted. And without good comps, I felt it was better to adjust the cap rate.
All right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, appreciate the recommendation made by Mr. Brokus. As just go over a couple of points as mentioned. There's a whole bunch of business value or business services that are provided with the revenue being received primarily, not exclusively, but a lot of it has to do with the 3 meals a day, and there's also housekeeping and laundry, and so the same kind of services that we had encountered in the first appeal. This particular property, though, so I'll ask the board members and Mr. Brokus to turn to page 16 initially. So on page 16, you can see our requested value. It's based upon, there are a number of differences in this case. The similarity relates to the expense ratio. We've applied a stabilized expense ratio of 43.7%. It results in a different number because of our lower calculation of the potential market gross rent, which I'll get into in a second. And we're also higher with the capitalization rate at the suggested rate of 6.00% in this case. On the upper right hand of that page, wanted to make the board and members aware of this. This one's particularly, the suite mix we've talked about, it's got a very high proportion of bachelors and 27 one-bedroom units. But if you look to the right of that, the bachelor, all units, but the bachelor units are particularly small at only 256 square feet. And then because of that layout and the function that was sort of the way that this property was built, with trying to have a high number of residents in the building based on these centralized services like meals, the bachelors don't have any kitchens whatsoever. So that's a very, very serious impediment, we'd suggest, and a very serious factor to take into account, not just the suite mix, not just the size, but the bachelors have no kitchen whatsoever, and the one bedrooms have limited kitchens. So I'm going to briefly then turn back to page 8, and I'll flesh out that point a little bit more. So in this particular case, so the one, now there's 2 facilities, one at 188. That's not that's not the property we're looking at. We're looking at 180 Worthington. There's sort of 2 properties that operate in tandem. If you look at the second last paragraph there, the 27 one-bedroom suites have kitchenettes with microwaves, no stove, a fridge, a 3-piece bathroom, no balconies. But again, that's the one bedroom, and the bachelor has none of that. So again, very serious consideration in our approach in this case. If you turn to page 13, Recall that one of the differences we still face in our respective valuations is our calculation of the potential gross rent. We've taken, in this case, 80% of the CMHC Zone 10 St. Vital rates, and based on the estimate of 80% for suites such as these, we come in at a suggested rate of $766 per unit per month, which results in a total potential gross rent of $689,530. So that is certainly lower than the model-driven rates in this case. So then going back to page 16, we've applied that $689,530 as our potential market gross rent, taking the 4.7 vacancy. And again, we've applied, notwithstanding the actual expenses, which you can see there for 20 and 21 were a lot higher. We've applied the 43.7% expense ratio for stabilized expenses of 287,123, resulting NOI is 370,343 and capped at 6%, results in a suggested value of 6,172,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Barocas, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Barocas, requirement for summary?
No, thanks.
Mr. Reimer?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 6, 180 Worthington Avenue. Next item on the docket is item number 7, file number 24-2765, address is 182 Belleville Road. And we're dealing in 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barocas, allow us to get to your brief, please. When you are ready, please.
Okay, sounds good. File number 24-2765, roll number 080041777500, 182 Belleville Road. It's a Manitoba housing property. Assessed value $9,040,000. 1977 actual year built. We only got a 1982 effective year built on it though. 60 suites, 80 outdoor parking spots. Page 3 shows the income value summary. 34 2-bedroom, 26 3-bedroom for the composition of the 60 units. Average monthly rent $1296.91. We have an agreement on NOI and it's a cap rate dispute unless anything's changed. So we're at 5.15 or 150 per unit. I'm not going to change that, and I'll tell you why. So for one, if we go to page 5 here, you can see the CMHC breakdown of the building. If you go to page 6, it shows that we're only at 81% of the CMHC zone year and building unit rents. So that's quite low. So keeping in mind that it is Manitoba housing, let's move on. Page 7 shows the CMHC source tables. Cap rate is on page 8. There's a permit for $3 million in regards to constructing an addition in the front of a 3-story 24-unit apartment building to establish a caretaker office, including interior and exterior alterations to the existing building. So we've got pictures on page 11 of the aerial. The outside looks like it's in good shape. If you can zoom in there. Then during my research, I was able to click on page 12. Just some information in regards to the extent of the renovations around that time. there's a news release saying that they spent $7 million on newly renovated housing units on the Belleville Road apartments, consisting of 6 family units in 3 walk-up apartment buildings. The refresh included developing open living and dining areas, as well as modernized kitchens and some more details. So it says the total investment in Belleville Road was 7.6. Then, you know, they said they're gonna spend 100 million more on housing properties as well, but so they spent $7 million in 2003, and we have it assessed at $9 million. 2013, and we have it assessed at $9 million in 2023, effectively. So there's some pictures that follow. You look at the outside, looks good. Like they clearly did a whole bunch of stuff. When housing does do work, they tend to do a whole bunch all at once. So, well, it's not, I wouldn't say it's luxury, but I mean, it looks pretty darn good. Mechanical, looks like that's mechanical done on page 19. So yeah, these are pictures from an inspection that was done. So I didn't change the cap rate, and I feel that when you look at the rental comps, we have an agreement on NOI, so it doesn't matter. So I think 5.15, based on all the work that they did, is justified. That's my evidence.
Thank you. Maybe for clarification for everybody here, Mr. Barocas, pardon me, you said there was an agreement? Did
Well,
I
there's
miss-
not an agreement, but we have the same NOI in our workup.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Reimer, any questions of the applicant?
Just one, Mr. Brokus, you've I believe stated it, but it is model driven, pardon me, top to bottom, including cap, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, question is asked and answered on cap, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
And rebuttal as well.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the assessor, pardon me?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linklater.
Yes, Mr. Barocas, when was this inspection done?
I suppose sometime after the renovation was done. I don't have the exact date, but it would have been sometime between 2013 and now.
Okay, so then you're gonna, do you agree that then these pictures are not recent, correct?
Well, I mean, I didn't go inspect it. So it depends on what you would call recent. What would you refer to as recent?
In the last 2 years?
Let me double check.
I'm just asking, you don't have a date at all in your notes?
Let me take a quick look in my notes here, unless there's a photo. Sometimes there's like a date stamp on some of the photographs. I didn't see that. Interior inspection completed on November 15th, 2013. So yeah, it would have been right after the renos. So yeah, nothing recent.
Okay, so this reno then is 12 years old, correct? As are the pictures?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, cap rate was model driven, so okay, thanks. That's everything.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Reimer, allow us to get to your brief, please. Mr. Reimer, when you're ready, please, 182 Belleville
Page 15, please.
Road. There we go. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, this debate distills to cap rate. As Mr. Brokus mentioned, we're applying the same NOI. Obviously, again, we're talking about a non-market actual revenue and expenses and significant losses shown, but that's a function of the operating model of this building owner. So we are applying the same NOI. Cap rate we're suggesting is 6%. Recall that this is a building with a 1977 original age, variant age of 1982. Presumably reflecting the work that was done, as Mr. Brokus had mentioned. So a variant age of 1982. Our range for that age bracket being between 1970 and 1989 is between 5.5 and 6.25. I have selected based on the owner of the property, the business model, and the characteristics. I've selected a rate of 6%, so a little bit high on the higher end of the range, but certainly well within it, and that results in a requested value of $7,759,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Brokus, any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, given the scope of the renovations, do you think that they spent $7 million? Do you think 6% is too high of a cap rate?
Well, the question's a fair question, Mr. Brokus. My answer would be no, but I'm going to put a caveat on that. Obviously, that's a significant sum of money. But again, as far as recall from our earlier discussion, there's buildings that have substantial deferred maintenance items. This wouldn't have substantial deferred maintenance items, presumably, but certainly the wear and tear over the 12 years, potentially because of higher tenant turnover and such. So I'm applying the 6% in the context of those renovations and reflecting the fact that those renovations are several years out now, and also, as I say, the range for the departments presumably put the 1982 variant age on it based on the work that was done, and we're not disagreeing with that variant age. And within our brackets, it goes from 5.5 to 6.25. I'm selecting 6, Mr. Brokus, but I'd suggest minimum 5.5% or 5.75 would not be surprising if that was to be applied. But I've selected 6.
Okay. All right, those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Linklater?
I also have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'll just leave it. Okay. I have no questions either. Mr. Brokus, requirement for summary?
I mean, they did $7 million of renovations and we're only $3 million higher than that. So I think we're good.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer?
Mr. Chairman, $7 million was spent to maintain the asset. So I don't agree somehow a perception you can take that $7 million and somehow factor that as a dollar for dollar benchmark for 2025 or the valuation date of April 1, 2023. It's not like they enhanced this asset, they expanded it, or they made it other than what it was. It was refreshing what was there. The department's put a variant age of 1982 with an original age of 77 reflecting that. And that's, I think, an appropriate reflection of what's going on here in the context of the entire property, and ask the board to apply the 6% cap rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reimer. I have to ask because I think we're all thinking it. You mentioned that you wouldn't be surprised if a cap rate of 5.75 would be applied. Could you clarify that?
Absolutely. So the range. So again, referring back to the capitalization, you need not turn there, but the capitalization rate study, our bracket that this property would fall into is 1970 to 1989. And the capitalization rate range for properties within that bracket is from 5.50% to 6.25. I've selected, based on my review, I've selected 6%, but if one were to go with a 5.75%, Mr. Chairman, I would understand why that is in this case. I mean, I would not take issue with it. So
okay.
if you would like, I can certainly calculate, tell you what I'll do. I'll calculate using the NOI in 5.75.
Yes, please.
That would the value then, I'll just use the rounded value. The value then would be 7,558,000.
Okay, thank you very much for doing that and explaining. And I think we will leave it at that. All
No,
right.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, let me recalculate. Something's not right.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
That
agree.
that number's wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I took the expenses, so let me do this again. That number was too low. Ah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, that's better. 8,097,000. 8097.
Perfect. Yeah. We were all recalculating it. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Reimer.
Yep.
Okay, that concludes item number 7, 182 Belleville Road. Last item on the docket is item number 8, file number 24-3247. Address is 187 de la Cathedral Avenue. We're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Barocas, when you are ready, please.
Sorry, Mr. Assessor, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Muted. 24-3247-06-06-06-09-100 is the roll number. 187 De La Cathedral, Manitoba housing property, 8,857,000. 1973. We don't have an effective age. It's got 101 suites, 61 outdoor parking spots to it. Page 3 shows the breakdown: 86 bachelor, 14 one bedroom, 1 2 bedroom. And then we've got our modeled workup right here. So 47.72 expense ratio, 5.3 cap rate. It's only $87,000 per unit. I mean, the rent is pretty low on this one. $760. That was based on the area. That's a consideration that I took into in not adjusting the cap rate. I felt the rent level already accounts for the unit breakdown. So rent comparables here are on page 4, rent comparable analysis found here on 5 and 6. You can see we're 85.7% of the CMHC rents here, so we're quite a bit lower. And again, this analysis does take into account what they're saying, like that's based on what bachelors and 1 bedrooms are using it for. So I'm not using, 3 bedroom rents. There's 1 2, but it's mostly bachelor and 1 bedroom rents to 73. So on page 5, the range goes from 60 to 74. So we're kind of at the top of that range, but still, obviously, I'm not going to go to the next one. That's just something I'd like to point out. And then we're just above 100 units here. So you can see the average is 886 in 2023. That's pretty darn low. And we're only saying 760 for rent in St. Boniface for bachelor unit. It's pretty good for 2023. You probably have a hard time finding that on the private market that low. Cap rate evidence 8 and 9. And then we've got a permit here, 845,000 in 2008. Alterations to include renovating apartments from the main floor to the 9th floor by replacing entrance doors to all the apartments, installing a new fire alarm system. Also, new flooring, kitchen, bathroom cabinets, bathroom doors, and painting on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor. So they did a bunch of stuff in 2008. And then 2002, just going back, there's just another permit for 542,000. Retrofit existing masonry and building envelope. I'm not sure exactly what they did there, but they spent a bunch of money, but that's an older permit. So, and yeah, it's a not-for-profit. The Bachelor and Studios are 450 square foot. So on page 14, just some more information, just shows that there's some more acknowledgement of the newly renovated bachelor suites for seniors on a fixed income. So based on the work they did, there's an aerial on page 15, kind of a unique looking building. Based on the, the area it's in, the work that they did, overall, it's only 87,693 per unit. So I don't see justification in bumping the cap rate with the rent already that low. That's my evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Reimer, any questions of the assessor?
So again, Mr. Brokus, model driven top to bottom.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, cap rate questions and rebuttal questions asked and answered, please.
Noted, Mr. Reimer. Thank you. Ms. Linklater, any questions of the assessor? Mr. Whitbread.
Just looking, if you don't mind giving me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. So the renovations were done in 202 and 208 to bring this up to standard then.
Yeah, it looks like the units were done in 2008 as per the permit. On page 11, I haven't inspected it. I don't know what it looks like on the inside. If it's housing, it's nothing luxury. It looks like they just did them all at that time.
Yeah, they spent about 1.3 million on those 2 permits. Okay, no, that's no further questions.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Reimer, allow us to get to your brief, please. Mr. Reimer, when you're ready.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 15, please. So again, it's Mr. Brokus alluded to this. It's a 1973 build. It has got a very high proportion of bachelor suites, 86 bachelor suites, 15 one-bedroom suites. As you can see on page 15, the capitalization rate we're applying is 6% in this case. And the other significant difference, it relates to the calculation of potential market gross rent. The department's modeled rent is $921,884. Pardon me, our suggested market rent is $831,072. That in turn, I'll just go backwards a couple of pages for that particular item. If you go back to our page 12, we looked at the CMHC data for the market rent, and for Zone 9 St. Boniface, the bachelor rent is $820 and the $1,070 for the one-bedroom units. So we've applied a factor of 80% to those particular rental rates, and that results in a potential gross market rent of $831,072. And if you turn back to page 15, you can see there on line 3, that's $831,072. We applied the 2.6% vacancy and results in an effective gross income of $809,464. What we have done is we've applied the same expense ratio, so the 47.7%. So at the bottom of that page, you can see our expenses are significantly less than the department's modeled expenses. That's a function of the lower top line revenue. And then that results in an NOI of $423,350 with a cap at 6%. It leads to our request of $7,056,000. Thank you. And capitalization rate study please, and rebuttal please entered.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus, any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, on page 12. So you assigned overall rents $685. When I'm looking at the chart, and I look at like the core area rents, like Zone 4, Lord Selkirk, the rents that CMHC says there for bachelor suites are 628. That's not that much lower. Do you think you might have taken maybe too big of a haircut off the rents, when looking at it in that context?
No, I mean, I've applied the 20 or the 80% ratio, Mr. Brokus. These are based on the actual units here. I believe it's being fair. What I don't know is in Lord Selkirk, and I understand what you're saying, but certainly I don't have the detailed data for that area as to what the unit sizes are, what the amenities might be. So I think I'm trying to be reasonable with the 80%, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And then just, I know, did you take, I know the permit's not in your brief, but knowing now that they did a cabinetry and interior refresh for all the units in 2008, does that maybe give you a cause to reevaluate the rent you've applied?
No, not at all, actually, and I'll explain why. It's a permit that, of course, is from 2008, so we're talking about 15 years removed. And if you look at the declared construction value, Mr. Brokus, it's 845,000, and while that's not insignificant, it certainly wouldn't have a bearing on my, the adjustments I've been making 15 years later as of the reference date. The permit value just isn't that significant, and it's quite dated.
Okay. And a 6 cap in St. Boniface, do you think that's a bit high as well?
Again, looking at the effective age, what is it, 1973. I do not believe it's out of the range at all. The 6%, and I understand again what you're saying, that St. Boniface, perhaps relative to some of the other areas that you've referenced, is better. But I'm also using a cap rate that's not 6.25, but I'm using 6% based on the aging characteristics.
Okay. And then would you agree just on page 6 that it looks like the exterior of the building looks to be in good condition, like it's got newer windows in there?
Yep.
Okay.
Agree. Yep.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, any questions of the applicant?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Brokus, any requirement for summary?
No, thank you.
Mr. Reimer?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both parties for appearing. We have heard all the items scheduled on the docket today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I need 5-minute break.